Hello, and welcome to Afternoon Tea with Karen. Today I'm going to have a look at why the trans activists scream abortion stuff.
Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Green Left Show. Today we're going to be talking about trans rights. My name's Alex Bainbridge. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that we are filming this show on stolen Aboriginal land. Sovereignty was never ceded, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Also, at the outset, I just want to say that if you like the work that we do, please become a Green Left supporter if you're not already. It is the number one way you can help support the work that we do. It is the best way to get the content that we produce, as well as a bit of financial support for Green Left. It makes all the difference. Plans start from just $5 a month, and it's, as I said, the number one way you can support our work. Today we're going to be talking about trans rights, and I'm joined by two guests, Charlie Murphy, who is a trans activist in Sydney and a member of Pride and Protest, as well as other groups, and also Nova Sabrelski, who is a trans activist in WA and a member of the Socialist Alliance. The overturning of Roe versus Wade in the United States by the Supreme Court has been a dramatic development, perhaps not surprising, but nevertheless still is very shocking. And what it does show is that rights that have been long taken for granted can be overturned and upended by an insurgent right wing. One of the main campaigns that the right wing has been waging in recent years in order to gain ground is their attack on trans rights.
Now, before we do this one, something they do that really annoys me is they use reproductive rights to describe abortions. And reproductive rights also includes contraception. So that's dealing with something before it happens, not dealing with something after the fact. And I don't like how she uses it anyway. I don't like the messing with my words anyway, like on all levels.
Okay, right, it's 2023 and it's still the case that politicians, judges and whoever still think they've got the right to control our bodies and tell us what to do and to deny us bodily autonomy. And really that means we're almost treated like incubators. And I think that sense of looking at large swathes of America, chunks of Europe, where women and pregnant people are forced to carry an unwanted or perhaps unviable pregnancy to term by law. That is the dystopian world that we live in today. That's not, this might happen, that is what's happening today. And I think that when we look at it even globally, beyond Europe and the US, more than 25 million unsafe abortions occur every year, and at least 40,000 people die of those. It's the most preventable way that women die through maternity of some sort. Because we know that bans don't stop abortions, they just make them more dangerous. That's the reality. Abortion is part of everyday life, and it has been part of every human society in history, controlling fertility, whether it was women in ancient Egypt, they mixed a paste of fermented crocodile shit or honey, or women who saw that in antiquity that goats miscarried when they were eating certain grasses, so they would then eat those grasses in order to stimulate an abortion. This is something that's been going on forever, and the only difference is whether it's legal and whether it's safe. And I think that, so today really I'm going to look at why is abortion and reproductive rights more widely such a central part of a right-wing agenda. And I'm also going to talk specifically about the far right as well, because the far right is growing and is having an impact, and I think there's another side of that agenda that I want to explore as well, because I want to look at how the ideas around reproductive rights fit into a socially conservative worldview about women's role and sexuality, but it also fuels a eugenicist, racist agenda about building a master race and about encouraging the reproduction by some women while cracking down on the ability of others to give birth. So I think we have to see those two things in tandem really to understand reproductive rights as a whole issue. Because when you think about where those ideas about building a master race and encouraging some women to reproduce and sterilizing others, this was brought to its most murderous and terrible logic in the Holocaust, wasn't it? 6 million Jewish people died, murdered in the Holocaust. Hundreds of thousands of people sterilised because they weren't seen by the Nazis as being fit to have children. That's where the logic takes you. But I want to talk about how these ideas are gaining not only a following, but our positions of people in parliaments and in governments are actually putting these forward. And I think we start with maybe, so why is it, I'm asking the question? Well, let's say what it isn't about. Being against abortion rights is not about religion, primarily. It's not about caring about babies at all. And it's not even about morality. I mean, Donald Trump succeeded in the biggest rollback in rights that affects millions of women and pregnant people in America today. He's not a religious man. I'm sure I don't need to share that with you. You know, he has no morality. He is not, you know, this was driven by a purely transactional thing to get votes. But of course, the people that oppose our rights use the language of morality and religion and, you know, that in order to try and get across their view. And I think we have to expose that and challenge it. So, for instance, these people who say they're pro-life, you know, what a lie that is. I mean, number one, the so-called pro-life lobby in America has been responsible for the murder of at least 11 staff in doctors and other staff within clinics, abortion clinics, and the attempted murder of 26 others. In Texas, they even proposed a bill that would have execution for women who had abortions. They wanted the death penalty. So, you know, pro-life, I don't believe it. And in Ireland and in Poland and in other places, women have died because of a ban on abortion. And actually not because they had to go to the back street, but because they were in a dangerous miscarriage or pregnancy in a hospital, and doctors, because of the law, felt they couldn't intervene. That's what happened to Savita Halabanafar and others. So this is, again, abortion bans mean women die. There's nothing pro-life about it. And also, this, you know, some people say these reproductive rights, you know, attacking reproductive rights is about imposing white male supremacy, particularly when they talk about the far right. This is not a simple gender war. You know, as it happens, many of the leaders of far right organisations across Europe are women, you know, most famously Marine Le Pen and Giorgio Meloni in Italy. But the person who led the way and wants to go further in the Supreme Court in America is a black man, Clarence Thomas. So that sense of it being simply a gender war isn't quite enough. And
Bugger that. She can't blame it on white supremacy. Anyway, let's look at something else.
Mrs. Margaret Slee, president of America's Planned Parenthood Federation, maintains that European women should stop having babies for the next 10 years.
But Mrs. Slee, in this country, having babies is the only thing left which is both unrationed and untaxed. Do you think we really ought to stop?
Well, I suppose a subject like that is really so personal that it's entirely up to the parents to decide. But from my view,
Margaret Sanger's rabid racism, anti-Semitism, and violent suggestions on eliminating all non-whites from American society endeared her to the eugenics crowd. She wanted an all-white, healthy, intelligent society built upon the concept of racial eradication years before Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were even a thought. In 1934, the Nazi Party adopted her radical positions, with Goebbels saying, "Margaret Sanger is the best National Socialist in America." In fact, the September 15, 1935 Nuremberg laws classified races according to an insane chart drafted by Dr. Wilhelm Stuckart and Dr. Friedrich Kritzinger. The official name was the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor. These laws embodied many of the racial theories underpinning Nazi ideology, which they adapted from Margaret Sanger. These laws could provide the legal framework for the systematic persecution of Jews in Germany, who at that time were deemed a race and not a religion, and the eugenics behind them were taken from the world of Sanger. In fact, her theories and opinions influenced men like SS Captain Dr. Josef Mengele, the Beast of Auschwitz, and his associates, Dr. Karl Klauberg, Dr. Hertha Oberhäuser, Hitler's personal physician Dr. Karl Brandt, just to name a few. When Hitler authorized the Action T4 euthanasia program to murder the handicapped, mentally ill, and other undesirables from German society, the doctors and nurses were given the program directly from Margaret Sanger's own philosophy. On August 18, 1939, the Reich Ministry of the Interior circulated a decree requiring all physicians, nurses, and midwives to report newborn infants, and children under the age of 3 who showed signs of severe mental or physical disability. The man who started the program was Dr. Carl Brandt, and they were disguised as children's clinics and advertised that they would treat their abnormalities and infirmities. In fact, they were death centers, where the children were quietly killed and the cause of death misrepresented as by other means, such as pneumonia, tuberculosis, etc. Dr. Brandt himself claimed that Sanger's methods were most effective and, if performed correctly, are ingenious. In Sanger's own words, she peddled racism, eugenics, contraception, abortion, while demonstrating a visceral hatred for children, parenthood, marriage, and the Catholic Church. The following quotes are directly from Margaret Sanger's own writings and interviews. 1. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. 2. A marriage license shall in itself give husband and wife only the right to a common household and not the right of parenthood. 3. All of our problems are the result of overbreeding among the working class. Knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. Its general, though prudent, practice must lead to a higher individuality and ultimately to a cleaner race. 4. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are a menace to the human race. 5. The masses of Negroes, particularly in the South, still breed carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. 6. Birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian churches. I look forward to seeing humanity free someday of the tyranny of Christianity, no less than capitalism. 7. Every single case of inherited defect, every malformed child, every congenitally tainted human being brought into this world is of infinite importance to that poor individual. But it is scarcely less important to the rest of us and to all of our children who must pay in one way or another for these biological and racial mistakes. 8. It now remains for the United States government to set a sensible example to the world by offering a bonus or a yearly pension to all obviously unfit parents who allow themselves to be sterilized by harmless and scientific means. Margaret Sanger, the woman heralded by the Democrats and left-wing ideologues in the United States for her positions on women's reproductive rights, always failed to include her genocidal positions on ethnic cleansing. She died on September 6, 1966 in Tucson, Arizona. But Margaret Sanger was not alone. The late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in a New York Times interview, "Frankly, I had thought that at the time Roe was decided, there was concern about population growth and particularly growth in populations that we don't want to have too many of." In Elle magazine, Ginsburg also stated that poor people should have ready access to abortions because it makes no sense as a national policy to promote birth only among poor people. In 2015, out of $1.29 billion in total revenue, $553.7 million came from the government reimbursing Planned Parenthood for their services. In 2020, Planned Parenthood performed 383,460 abortions, the highest number of abortions it has yet reported, and an increase of nearly 28,600 from the previous year. And in the United States, the abortion rate for black women is almost 5 times that for white women. In July 2020, Planned Parenthood quietly removed Margaret Sanger's name from its headquarters in Manhattan, New York. Obviously, the times had caught up with Margaret Sanger. Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share.
They probably didn't catch up with her the times. They probably just decided to rebrand, like WPATH did to Harry Benjamin's Association. So that might have been a pretty crap explanation, but it's the best I can do. It's got to do with socialism and the eugenics thing, and so they yell it at people. Yeah. And online they write it, oh, well, you don't care about abortions, so you don't care about women's rights, so you aren't proper women and stuff. And I just think, what's that nonsense they're spitting? And now you know. So that'll do. See you later. Bye.